I went about it a very strange way because I never set my heart. I quite liked. I mean, I liked acting at school. I was enchanting as the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland, I think. I still have the costume. I slip into it sometimes. I did some acting when I was at university as a sort of, in the drama society there. But it was never going to be, I never thought it would be my career. And then, oddly enough, I made a film, an amateur film at Oxford when I was there. Some guy got together a little bit of money with the help of John Schlesinger, whose portrait is just outside this room, and we shot that film, and really it was pretty pretentious. But agents came up to me right here at BAFTA in summer of 1982 when it had a screening and said, do you want to be an actor? And I said, no, thank you very much. And then I went home and I was thinking, because I was due to go off and do another degree somewhere else, and I suddenly thought, actually, I need money. So I rang up the agents. I said, all right, yeah, I'll be an actor for a year. And I was so bad, frankly, that I thought I'd better do another job, another acting job to prove I'm not as bad as I was in the first one. And that process has now gone on for 36 years.
The acting seed was planted when I was in school, in high school, And I fell in love first of all with the literature. I was bored out of my mind. I remember like one wet Wednesday, like totally bored out of my mind doing Henry IV Part 1. And in a moment of the teacher reading parts of Henry IV Part 1, I was suddenly brought out of it, out of my kind of, dream state, and just into a kind of hyper focus, because there was something about it that I really just resonated with me, that I really related to. And so for the next couple of weeks, I thought that I'd discovered Shakespeare, and I was telling everybody, there's this guy, he's really interesting. And I, in the end, decided that I would check out the sort of format that Shakespeare was writing for. So we had a school theatre, and I auditioned for a part in the play that was coming up, which was Measure for Measure, and played Angelo in the end, and that was really the beginning of it for me. So it was really just keying into Shakespeare, keying into the literature, finding it relevant and passionate and interesting, and that's what began the journey.
My parents were both actors, and when I was born, I was a mistake because they didn't have the money. It really was hard for them when I was little. So they had to work and do everything, and they just took whatever they could. Dad was in things like Z-Cars and did a couple of episodes of the original Doctor Who with William Hartnell and stuff like that. I thought that I would be perhaps a writer. Well, I suppose I am a writer, but I didn't think that I was going to be an actor. From quite early on, I thought I would try to be a comedian. I wanted to be somebody like Lily Tomlin, who wrote with Jane Wagner her own material and did shows that were character-based. That was the area I was interested in.
Acting is kind of scary, and you have to operate whilst your head is attacking you, if you're me anyway. I never watch anything I'm in if I can possibly help it, because I find it takes too long to recover and I have to go to work. I don't mind watching if I do cartoons. For instance, I was once required to be a squid man in a movie. I was an octopus guy, and it was all digitally achieved. So, and I was perfectly happy watching that, because what are you going to say? You don't like my squid? Well then, live with it, because it's your problem. And also I had a very successful, my squid was world class. My squid was an award-winning squid, because the 100 men and women who created my squid, the first thing the director said to them when they presented the squid was, get your acceptance speech ready. And they won an Oscar. So I was in very good company.
I have a little golden rule myself. If I've got to page 7 or 8, without getting up to make a cup of tea, then I know it's quite good, If between pages 1 and 8 I have to get up and make a cup of tea, I know it's not, there's something missing from it. In which case then I will read the middle 5 pages and then the last 5 pages. But if it's held my attention, I'd read it all the way through.
Since both of your parents were actors, I'm wondering if you ever questioned whether there was a genetic component that guided you in your future career.
I think it's a lack of imagination, actually. Maybe, I think it's very difficult to kind of have been brought up with actors and writers and directors and that kind of creativity and not be fascinated by it. It always feels like you can change the world, or it did when I was small and I was watching my parents. So I think it was always something that I wanted to be a part of.
Can you remember the first time you kind of sensed this is what you wanted to do?
I never remember wanting to do anything else. I wish that I did, because I think it would be so much more interesting if I could say, yes, I wanted to be a fireman, or I wanted to be something. But it was always, apparently, and obviously I don't remember, but apparently I asked for an agent at the age of 3.
Did they get you one?
No, they didn't, and I was really angry, and they finally got me one when I was 6. So it took a lot of work to get that agent. I'm pretty sure that I didn't know what one was. I think they were just always calling the house, and I didn't understand why I didn't have one.
I was at the London Academy, I was at Lambda, and there were auditions, and although traditionally, strictly speaking, when you're at drama school, you don't audition for parts professionally, but because it was a Spielberg film and because it was considered that it would be interesting, useful, and we were allowed to audition. A number of people were allowed to audition, and I got the part, and that was an incredible sort of journey. But at 19, to go from London over to the States to Los Angeles to make the film, and that was really my sort of transition into filmmaking. Even though I'd never really considered myself or thought of myself as a film actor, and it wasn't an ambition of mine actually. I wanted to do theatre, and I wanted to be a theatre actor, and that's all I saw for in terms of being an actor. And even having made the film with Spielberg, I still wanted to be a theatre actor. So I came back to London and carried on working in theatre, and was lucky enough to go off to do a few plays actually at the National Theatre not long after I got back, and then but the sort of balance, I guess once you've got a taste of that, the sort of film language, it became a question of wanting to really have a balance and have both things, and go back and forth.
I didn't have any family connections. Amateur dramatics was my first experience of wanting to be an actor, getting on stage at school, and then a local amateur dramatic society. Then I went to the National Youth Theatre of Great Britain, did a summer course there, which made me realise that you can actually attempt to have a career at this, and then I auditioned for drama school. So I went to RADA, did a 3-year course, got an agent in the 3rd year. He told me to change my name, my real name. He said I sounded like a hobbit, because my name is Andrew Clutterbuck, so I changed it to Lincoln. And then it took me a while to get going, but eventually the first job I got was with John Sim, and a few other. Mark Warren was in it as well. It was an independent English movie called Boston Kickout.
With film, there's really no rehearsal. You're lucky if you get a moment round a table in the week before you start shooting, and suddenly you think, oh Christ, they're going to do that. Okay, well, that I see. Or worse, you start to, rehearse lightly. You start to say some lines as your character, and you see everyone looking nervous. And then the director says, yeah, I didn't see him having that voice. And then you have to rethink everything with a few days to go. I sound like such a terrible old lovey, but the dream is that you can trust them. If they're good, and if they're not in a panic. And with film, it's particularly important that people aren't in a panic. And quite often I am. And really the whole of film acting is about how to avoid panic and try and be as relaxed as you can. And if you're two relaxed actors together, both quite comfortable in the way you're playing a part, you can go into the scene with no preconceived idea and just see where it takes you, see what you do and react to that. And it's a lovely feeling, because everything's then fresh. The way you do your lines completely fresh, because it's based on what you just did. And the camera, I've learnt, tends to love anything that's fresh and which is invented in that moment. And that's very often the take that ends up in the film. Whereas when you're just repeating the way you'd practiced it for months in the bathroom mirror, that tends to be a bit dead.
When I was younger, and you'd be in digs up and down the country and hanging out in bars with actors, and it would get to that part of the conversation where actors discussed their process, I would go to the men's room or put the kettle on or just go quiet, because my dreadful secret was that I didn't have a process, and I still don't have a process. And I just never got around to having a process. The standard questions are, how much research did you do for this part? And I am old enough now, and it's refreshing. When you're younger, you have to lie. But when you're my age, you're allowed to say, if you ask me the question, how much research did I do for this part? The answer is absolutely none whatsoever. Because I work at a level of writing where anything I need to know, any of the information, usually is in the script. If there's something specific, you go ask, but it's very rare. And also they say, how did you get into character? Well, I'm also old enough to say that I've never knowingly been in character in my life. I've heard great things about it, but it's just outside of my experience. I don't actually know what they're talking about.
I went to university, I studied English, I met Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie, Robbie Coltrane, Ben Elton. We all did comedy together, sketch comedy, for 2 years after I left university. At the very least, I did my own sketch show, I did musical theatre, I did mime, I did all sorts of stuff. I didn't act until I was 27 years old. And then even then it was by accident. Robbie was doing a thing called Tutti Frutti. John Byrne had written it. It's a Scottish character. They said, we need someone who can do the accent. My mum's Scottish. I happened to know Robbie. He said, do you want to come and meet them? And it happened by accident. And I didn't know how to do it. I had not been trained, and I was quite nervous. And I thought, oh, well, I suppose it's just like doing a sketch, only for longer, which is exactly what it turned out to be.
When I started out, one of the main things for me was I wanted to experience a lot of different roles, a lot of variety in what I was doing, and really explore the sort of parameters of the craft in that way. And I think that was a really useful way of beginning. And then, I mean, things do change, over time, and you become more interested in maybe just a few more specific things and really exploring those, the kind of narrow but deep kind of way of looking at things. And that is a useful thing as well. But I wouldn't start like that, I think I would start with trying, I think it was the right way to begin. To try and do as many different things as possible, to try and really explore as much as possible, because it is a profession that allows you to explore so many different worlds, and it's one of the great things about it, that you can go to all these different spaces. And so I was lucky enough to be able to do some of that.
The whole point of a rehearsal room is making mistakes. It's creating a safe space and a safe environment so that you have the time to fail, which isn't what a film set is. A film set is, we have to shoot this scene now. We have to get it done by the end of the day. I don't know is not something that you can say on a film set, but I don't know is a really important thing to be able to say when you're kind of developing a character. And it's also, once you've fallen down in front of your fellow actors, once you've made a mistake, once you've done something terribly, it kind of binds you together as a team, and once you've found the way that it works, it binds you together as a team. It doesn't necessarily when you're on set, because then you're just going, oh my God, this doesn't work, and what the hell are we going to do? And that panic sets in. But I think that, that time of bonding is really important for...
Rehearsals are kind of a luxury. I mean, I'm sure you've done most of your films haven't permitted that kind of process.
Nope.
What happens then?
You really hope it's going to be okay. And sometimes it's not. And I think as you go on, you learn how to fake it. You learn how to create characters on your own. You do the preparation that you need on your own, whether that's you working with an acting coach, whether that's working with a dialogue coach, whether that's just going through. You learn your trade, and I think that's what most people do.
I was approached in the street recently by a young woman who said that she'd seen me in a play and she very much enjoyed it. And I said, well, thank you. And she said, I'm trying to be an actor. And I said, how's that going? She said, well, I'm having a little trouble with my drama teacher. I said, what kind of trouble are you having with your drama teacher? She said, well, I'm having difficulty with the feelings. I said, the feelings. She said, like I would, she said, the feelings, like I would know. I said, you saw me in a play. She said, yeah, and you thought it was good. She said, I thought it was absolutely marvelous. I said, well, I can absolutely guarantee you that I'm not feeling anything. I'm at work. Do you know what I mean? I'm a bit busy. I'm a bit pushed. I have to achieve about 1,500 things over a period of 2.5 hours or whatever the play length might be. I have to make love to a woman, smoke cigarettes, reach the door handle, hit the door handle when that verbal cue comes, because otherwise the lights all go funny. I have to, get semi-naked and eat chili con carne. I'm occupied. I can't be feeling stuff. That I do in my own time. And you can't phone up on a wet Wednesday and say, do you know what? I'm not feeling it, so I don't think I'll come in today.
I think uniqueness, I think a generosity, being able to make interesting choices. I think someone said to me one day that you can choose to react in a scene. You can have A, B, or C. Or if you're a really great actor, you can go D, E, F, G, find all these extraordinary ones. But the truly unique and brilliant actors realize that the best choice was A in the first place. So that there's an instinctiveness, there's a great imagination. But the beautiful gift about being sort of working for 20 years is that I'm constantly realizing that I don't really know what it is, and a young actor will come up to me and do a scene and it will blow me away, and it's a choice that I would never ever have considered, and it is like tennis. If you're in the thing I love about acting is you get to sort of play with other human beings, in 3 dimensions, and so I would say those qualities are really essential, and also tenacity.
When I started, there are so many things that I think now I wish I had known that I could be brave, that was important. It was important to push sort of boundaries for myself, and eventually I did learn those things, and I did try and do that, and it did help. But even if I had an instinct to do those things, I think I was, it caused me a lot of stress, when I was starting. And actually, I think if I was to speak to my younger self or something, I would say, don't be so stressed about it. Enjoy it. Enjoy being frightened. Enjoy being worried about things, and be brave, and just, be courageous, and push, because that's the only way to really understand the industry, I think, and understand yourself artistically.
There is another myth, and it's almost become a kind of way in which people demonstrate their status, which is not to know your lines. The myth is propped up with a particular piece of tosh, and the tosh is, if you learn your lines before going into a rehearsal situation, for instance, you will become imprisoned by intonations, and therefore that is a discourtesy to your fellow professionals. That's a complete and utter myth made up by people who didn't want to do their homework. That's it. But it's entered the language, and it's become refined over the years. And it's now, it's as if it's uncreative to know your lines, or uncreative to have studied them in any great depth, that we are supposed to wait for lightning or the muse or something. Well, I operate without a muse and without lightning, because I haven't got one, and I haven't got any. Acting is pretty straightforward, and it's not, and it's actions, and you need to be sort of directed and told. I do like being told what to do. When I worked first with Stephen Polyakov, my first job for him, as it were, the first thing I was required to do was to tell George V, played by Tom Hollander, that the whole of the Russian side of his family had been slaughtered in a basement the previous day. That was my first day's work with Stephen Polyakov. And I did it. And he came over and he said, that was very, very good. Don't wiggle your eyes about so much. And I rejoiced, because I know how to do that. He didn't come over and say, I think you should employ more secondary energy rather than primary energy, because, you know, and he didn't go into psychiatric terminology, because then I'm lost.